When my son Daniel first brought Olivia home, I wanted to believe she was everything he said she was: kind, smart, genuine. He looked at her like a man who had found his forever, and I, being the mother who'd prayed every night for his happiness, tried to see what he saw. But sometimes, love blinds you, and mothers see what sons cannot. It was a Sunday evening when they came over for dinner. The house was filled with the soft hum of the old clock and the smell of rosemary chicken, Daniel's favorite. I had spent the entire afternoon making it perfect, wanting her first impression of our home to be warm and welcoming. Olivia walked in like she already belonged there, graceful, confident, her hand resting lightly on Daniel's arm. She had a polished smile, the kind you practice in a mirror before stepping into someone's life. Her voice was sweet, her compliments steady and precise, like she had memorized every line. At first, I dismissed the unease tightening in my chest. Maybe she was just nervous. Maybe I was being too protective. Throughout dinner, Olivia laughed at Daniel's old stories, asked me about the garden, even offered to help with dishes. On the surface, she was perfect. But beneath that charm, something didn't sit right. She studied the dining room too carefully, her eyes lingering on the chandelier, the antique cabinet, the framed family photo by the stairs. It wasn't admiration. It was calculation. I tried to shake it off. After all, I wanted Daniel to be happy. He'd worked hard, bought his first car, landed a stable job. He deserved love. And if Olivia was the one, then who was I to stand in the way? But as the evening wore on, I noticed the small things. The way she asked about who technically owned the house. The way her tone softened when she mentioned long-term investments. Daniel brushed it off, smiling at her with that same boyish faith I'd seen since he was 5. When they left that night, I stood by the door watching their car disappear into the quiet street. The moonlight hit the old porch swing where my late husband used to sit. I could almost hear his voice. "Don't ignore what your gut tells you, Maggie." The next morning, I went to tidy the living room. That's when I noticed it. Olivia's handbag had been left behind. I picked it up to set it aside, but something fell out. A small piece of paper folded neatly, a phone number, and under it scribbled words, "Don't worry, it'll all be ours soon." I stared at it, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it wasn't hers. But deep down I knew. That evening, I called Daniel to let him know about the bag. Olivia answered instead, her tone oddly sharp for someone who had just met me. "Oh, just keep it safe, Mrs. Parker," she said quickly. "I'll get it next time." Then she hung up before I could say another word. When they came by the next weekend, Olivia's warmth had returned. But it felt colder than before. She moved through the house like a shadow testing walls, her eyes landing on every family heirloom, every detail that told the story of a life built from love and loss. I watched quietly, the way a mother does when she knows she's about to lose something. Later that night, as I passed by the kitchen, I heard her voice, soft but clear, drifting through the half-closed door. "Don't worry, I've got him wrapped around my finger. It's just a matter of time." My heart froze. I stood there gripping the doorway, the weight of truth sinking into my chest. She wasn't here for love. She was here for the house, for everything my husband and I built. And she didn't know one thing. She might be playing her game. But I still held the one card she'd never read, the fine print. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house felt like a whisper from the walls, warning me that something had already begun. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles in the dark, thinking about that piece of paper, those chilling words. "It'll all be ours soon." I wanted to believe I was mistaken. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe Olivia was careless, maybe it was a misunderstanding. But a mother's instinct doesn't quiet down once it's stirred. It grows louder with every doubt left unanswered. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the empty chair where my husband used to read the paper. I could almost see him there, glasses perched low, shaking his head with that quiet, knowing smile. "You always notice what others miss, Maggie," He was right. I always did. Before Daniel got married, my husband and I had agreed on one thing. Our home would always stay in the family, passed down only through blood, not by law, not by marriage, but by trust. We'd added that clause years ago when we updated the will. One sentence, buried deep in the paperwork. That said the house could never be sold or transferred without my signature. It was the fine print, the one Olivia hadn't read. I opened the old oak drawer where the family documents were kept. The papers were yellowed with time, the ink slightly faded. I traced my husband's signature with my fingertips. The memory of signing those papers together came rushing back. His steady hand, my hesitation, his reassuring voice. One day, this will protect Daniel from someone who doesn't love him for him. I hadn't realized how right he'd be. That afternoon, Daniel came by alone. He looked tired but happy, the kind of glow love gives you before it takes something away. "Mom," he said, smiling, "Olivia's thinking about redecorating the living room. You know, give it a fresh look. She says it's too vintage." I laughed softly, though my stomach twisted. Vintage? That's another word for history, Daniel. For family. He chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. Yeah, she just likes modern things. But don't worry, she respects what this house means to us. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But later that evening, I heard Olivia's car pull up outside. I watched through the curtain as she stepped out, phone pressed to her ear, pacing in the driveway. Her tone was sharp, businesslike. "He doesn't know yet," she said, glancing toward the house. "Once we're married, it'll be easy. He trusts me." My hands trembled. She was already planning ahead, talking like everything we had built was hers to claim. I waited until she hung up and came inside. She greeted me with a bright smile, her voice dripping honey. "Mrs. Parker, I brought you something, a candle. Thought you might like it for the living room." The scent filled the air, too sweet, too heavy. It made me dizzy. I thanked her politely and excused myself. I needed air, space to think. In the backyard, under the soft light of the moon, I took out my phone and called my lawyer, Mr. Henderson. "I need to review the property contract," I told him quietly. He hesitated. "Everything okay, Margaret?" I stared at the house, at the glow of the kitchen window where Olivia stood laughing with my son. "Just being cautious," I said. "I think someone might be reading between the lines, but not the ones that matter." That night, I placed the contract back in the drawer and locked it. The key felt heavy in my hand, colder than the night air. If Olivia thought she could play games with my family's legacy, she was about to learn that I'd written the rules long before she arrived. And this time, I wasn't just a mother protecting her son. I was the guardian of everything she wanted. The following week, Olivia began weaving herself deeper into our daily life, as if the house itself were a stage she now owned. Every morning she brought pastries, rearranged the kitchen flowers, and spoke with a sugary voice that barely concealed her sharp edges. She called me Mom now, too quickly, too easily. And each time she said it, something inside me bristled. Daniel, blinded by love, thought it was wonderful. "She just wants to feel like part of the family," he said one evening, his arm wrapped proudly around her shoulders. I smiled, but I could feel my husband's old watch ticking on my wrist, as if reminding me that time always reveals people's true intentions. 2 days later, I found her in the garden, phone pressed to her ear again. This time, her tone wasn't businesslike. It was desperate. "You told me it was guaranteed," she hissed. "He's her only heir, and the house is under his name once she's gone." "What do you mean there's a clause?" My heart pounded. She didn't see me standing there, frozen behind the curtain. Her words sliced through the calm like thunder. When Daniel came home that night, I couldn't keep it in anymore. "Daniel," I said quietly, "has Olivia ever talked to you about the house?" He frowned. "Mom, please don't start. She loves me. She's not after your property." "Then why does she keep asking about the will?" He sighed, exasperated. "You're overreacting." I looked at him, my boy, my world, and realized how deep her influence ran. She had wrapped him in silken lies, the kind that felt safe until they strangled. Later, when the house fell silent again, I walked into the study. The folder still sat in the drawer, its lock gleaming faintly under the lamplight. I whispered to the empty room, "You picked the wrong mother to fool, Olivia." The wind outside howled through the trees, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in that sound, I could almost hear my husband's voice again. "Watch her, Maggie. Watch her closely." I pulled the curtain shut, my heart heavy but steady. If this was a game she wanted to play, she had no idea who she was up against. The morning after, the house seemed to hum with a strange energy, that quiet before a storm when you can almost hear the tension in the air. Olivia arrived early, unannounced as always, holding a basket of croissants and a smile that looked too deliberate to be genuine. "Thought I'd surprise my favorite mother-in-law?" she chirped, setting the basket down on the counter. "Surprises aren't always pleasant." "Dear," I replied, rinsing a coffee cup. For a moment, she froze, just a flicker, before her expression smoothed back into charm. But I'd seen it. A lie always trembles before it breaks. As we sat across from each other, the morning sun slanted through the blinds, casting thin golden stripes across her face. She kept glancing toward the study door. I took my time sipping coffee, letting the silence grow heavy. Finally, she said, "Daniel mentioned something about your husband's will. You must miss him terribly." I met her gaze. "Every day. He was a wise man. He made sure our home would always stay protected." Her lips twitched. "Protected?" "Yes," I said softly. "From opportunists." The word hung in the air like smoke. She stood abruptly, forcing a laugh. "You really don't trust people easily, do you?" "Only those who give me a reason not to." Her jaw tightened. Then she smiled again, smoother this time. "Well, Daniel and I are family now. I'd hope that counts for something." "It does," I said, folding my hands. "Family means honesty." That afternoon, when they both left to run errands, I finally called Mr. Henderson, our family lawyer, to confirm what I already knew. The clause my husband had written years ago was still intact. The property shall not be transferred, mortgaged, or sold without the express written consent of Margaret Louise Carter. My name. My signature. My safeguard. But Henderson's tone carried hesitation. "Margaret, I must tell you something. I received an inquiry last week. Someone trying to access the deed records." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated. "The request came from Olivia Carter." I thanked him, my pulse steady despite the fury stirring inside. I'd expected this. She wasn't after my son's heart. She was after his inheritance. When Daniel came home that night, I sat him down. "Daniel, your wife tried to access the property records." He looked stunned. "What? That's ridiculous." "She wouldn't." "She did. I have confirmation from Henderson himself." He rubbed his temples. "Mom, maybe she was just curious." "Curious people don't call lawyers," I said flatly. His silence said everything. Later that evening, I found Olivia alone in the garden again, her phone glowing in the dusk. Her voice was sharp, angry. "I told you I'm handling it. The old woman won't live forever." That sentence sliced through me like a blade. She turned and froze when she saw me standing there. For the first time, her mask cracked completely. "You shouldn't sneak up on people," she said, her tone trembling. "Neither should you," I replied. My voice quiet but cold, for a heartbeat. We just stared at each other, two women bound by love for the same man, but divided by everything else. "You think you've won," she whispered, stepping closer. "But everyone has a weakness, Margaret. Even you." I leaned in, close enough that she could see the fire in my eyes. "Yes, my weakness is my son. But my strength is protecting him." She laughed bitterly and walked away, her heels echoing down the stone path. That night, I opened the study drawer once again, my fingers brushing the clause document. I slipped it into the safe and locked it. Let her scheme. Let her plot, I thought to myself. Because when she finally plays her hand, I'll be ready to end the game. The days that followed felt like walking on broken glass, every step cautious, every word measured. Olivia's smile had become sharper, her tone sweeter, her gestures exaggerated. She tried harder than ever to charm me, and that alone told me she was afraid. Daniel didn't see it, not yet. He was blinded by her tears, her gentle touches, the way she'd wrap herself around him whenever I entered the room, like she was reminding me he was hers now. One evening, I stood at the kitchen counter preparing tea when I overheard them in the living room. "I don't understand why she hates me," Olivia whispered. "I've done everything to please her." "She doesn't hate you," Daniel said softly. "She's just protective," Olivia sniffed, her voice trembling. "It's not protection. It's control." I closed my eyes, the teaspoon trembling slightly in my hand. Lies, spoken so tenderly they almost sounded true. When I stepped into the room, their conversation died. Olivia looked up, tears shimmering beautifully in the lamplight. "An actress at her finest. Margaret," she said with a quiver in her voice. "Can we please start over? I know how much this house means to you, to both of you." "Of course," I said, smiling thinly. "Trust takes time, Olivia. And time always tells the truth." Her eyes flickered just for a second, that quick, involuntary flash of irritation. I saw it, and she knew I saw it. That night, when Daniel had gone to bed, I checked the study. The safe was undisturbed, the keys where I'd left them. But on my desk sat something that hadn't been there before. A single folded note written in elegant handwriting. "If you keep interfering, you'll lose him." Just like before, my breath caught. Just like before. No one knew about the miscarriage I'd had before Daniel was born. No one except my late husband. I sank into the chair, my pulse pounding in my ears. How could she know unless Daniel had told her? The next morning I tried to act normal. I made breakfast, smiled, and asked about their plans. But something inside me had shifted. Not fear, not anger. Something colder. Later that afternoon, while Daniel was at work, I went to see Mr. Henderson again. He greeted me kindly, but with concern in his eyes. "Margaret," he said, "I've done more digging since we last spoke. You were right to be wary. Olivia's name appears on several questionable property transfers, all involving elderly families and their heirs." I gripped the armrest. "How recent?" "The latest was only a year before she met Daniel." I sat back, numb. It wasn't just greed, it was a pattern. A performance perfected. Before leaving, I asked Henderson to make an official copy of the clause, sealed and notarized. "If anything happens," I told him quietly, "make sure Daniel receives this." That evening, the atmosphere at home was tense. Olivia tried to make small talk, but my silence unnerved her. She kept glancing toward the study, her hand brushing her phone again and again. After dinner, Daniel excused himself to take a call upstairs. The moment his footsteps faded, Olivia turned to me. "You really don't like me, do you?" she said softly, the sweetness stripped from her tone. "I don't trust you," I said simply. She tilted her head. "Trust is earned. So is respect." Her smile vanished. "You think you're clever. But you're old, Margaret. You don't understand how the world works anymore." "Maybe not," I said, standing. "But I understand people. And I see you clearly now." Her jaw tightened, her eyes glinting. "Then I guess the games have begun." As she turned and walked away, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Because she was right. The game had begun, and I had no intention of losing. The next morning felt unnervingly calm, like the stillness before a storm. The house, usually filled with Daniel's laughter and Olivia's humming, was silent. She'd left early, claiming a doctor's appointment, though her tone had that slippery edge of evasion. I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. It mirrored the heaviness in my chest, dread, not from fear, but from the knowledge that I was finally about to expose the truth. By afternoon, my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, called. "Margaret," he said, "I've prepared the documents as you asked. I also found something else you should see." When I arrived at his office, he slid a manila folder across the desk. Inside were photocopies, property deeds, forged marriage certificates, and a photo of Olivia with a man I didn't recognize. They were smiling, standing in front of another house, one that had been sold months before she met. I closed the file. Then it's time we end her act. That evening, Daniel came home drenched from the rain, exhaustion lining his face. I waited until after dinner to tell him. "Daniel," I said softly, "I need you to see something." He frowned, wary. "Mom, please don't start again." "This isn't about suspicion anymore." I slid the folder toward him. "It's about facts." He hesitated, then opened it. I watched his eyes scan the pages, confusion, disbelief, then anger. "What is this?" he demanded. "It's who she really is," I whispered. "Her real name is Olivia Grant. She's been married before, twice. Both times the family's lost property to her." He slammed the folder shut. "That's insane. You don't know her like I do." "No, Daniel," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "You don't know her like I do." He stood abruptly and stormed upstairs, slamming the door. I sat there in the quiet, the ticking clock marking each second of my heartbreak. Later that night, I heard footsteps. Olivia had returned. Her heels clicked across the hardwood floor, then paused outside the study. I stayed in the hallway shadows, watching. She opened the safe. She had the code. My chest tightened. I'd changed that code 2 days ago. Her hand froze when the keypad blinked red. She tried again, wrong. Again, wrong. "Looking for something?" I said from behind her. She spun around, eyes wide, mask slipping for the first time. I was just checking the fine print? I finished. Her expression hardened. "You can't stop me, Margaret. Daniel loves me. I'm not stopping you. I'm saving him." She laughed softly, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you've won? You think he'll believe you over me?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "He doesn't need to believe me. He'll see for himself." Just then, the sound of footsteps on the stairs. "Daniel." He'd been listening. "Olivia," he said quietly, "what were you doing in the study?" Her face drained of color. "Daniel, He looked from her to me, then back at the safe. "I changed that code," he said slowly. "Why would you try to open it?" She stammered, searching for words, for another story to spin. But the lies had finally run out. I watched her shoulders sag, the fight leaving her eyes. She turned to Daniel, voice breaking. "I just wanted security. That's all I ever wanted." He stared at her for a long, painful moment, then whispered, "You already had it." The room fell silent except for the rain, still whispering against the window, washing away the last illusion. The next few days felt like walking through the wreckage of a storm. Daniel barely spoke. Olivia packed her things in silence, moving through the house like a ghost who no longer belonged. The laughter that had once echoed through these rooms now existed only in memory. I tried to give them space, but every sound, the closing of a drawer, the click of a suitcase latch, felt like another fracture splitting the foundation of our home. On the morning she left, she didn't say goodbye. She stood at the doorway, her eyes hollow but dry, a strange blend of pride and defeat painted across her face. "I did love him, you know," she said softly. "Just not enough to stop lying." And then she walked out into the drizzle, the door clicking shut behind her like the final punctuation to a sentence we all wished hadn't been written. Daniel stood there, staring at the closed door, his expression blank. "I thought she was different," he murmured. "I thought she was my future." I wanted to comfort him, to tell him he'd heal. But in that moment, the best thing I could offer was silence. So I just stood beside him, my hand resting lightly on his shoulder, the rain outside echoing the grief inside us both. Days passed. The house became still again. But beneath that quiet, I felt the faintest stirrings of something else. Not peace yet, but truth settling in, like dust after chaos. One evening, I found Daniel sitting in the study, the same folder of documents open before him. He was flipping through the papers, slower this time, reading not with anger but with clarity. "She was never after me," he said quietly. It was always about what I could give her. I nodded. That doesn't make your love any less real. It just means she didn't know how to value it. He looked up at me then, eyes red but steady. You tried to warn me. I just wanted to protect you, I whispered. Even when it made me the villain. He gave a small, broken laugh. I guess that's what mothers do. Later that night, I went into the living room. The lamp by the sofa cast its familiar amber glow. The air still carried faint traces of her perfume, blending with the scent of old wood and rain. I sat down, letting the memories wash over me, not just of Olivia, but of Daniel as a boy, of laughter and scraped knees, of love that had never needed fine print. That's when I noticed an envelope on the coffee table. My name written in neat cursive. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a short note in Olivia's handwriting. For what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt him. But survival makes people selfish. Take care of him the way I couldn't. Oh, my breath caught. The paper trembled in my hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not really, but it was a crack in the wall she'd built around her lies. A faint, fading echo of the woman she might have been if greed hadn't won. I folded the note and placed it in the drawer beside the framed photo of Daniel as a child. Some truths didn't need to be erased. They just needed to rest. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without fear. The storm had passed. The walls had come down, and in their place, something fragile yet honest began to grow. The quiet, complicated peace that comes after the truth finally takes its place in the light. The weeks after Olivia's departure felt strangely hollow, like the calm that settles over a battlefield after everyone has gone home. The house stood still, too clean, too quiet, too aware of its own emptiness. Even the sunlight that used to spill warmly through the curtains now felt pale, distant, unsure if it belonged here anymore. Daniel went back to work, but his eyes carried that faraway look I remembered from my own grief after his father passed. Some wounds don't bleed on the outside. They echo, softly but constantly, in the spaces between breaths. Every morning, I made coffee for 2 out of habit. I'd pour his cup, set it on the counter, and wait for footsteps that didn't come. Eventually, I'd drink both. It was a small ritual, the way mothers cope when they can't fix what's broken. Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying old conversations with Olivia in my head. Her laughter, her charm, the way she had slipped her arm around Daniel's shoulder like she'd always belonged there. I wanted to hate her, God knows I did, but every so often, I'd see flashes of something else in her eyes. Fear, desperation, maybe regret. One evening, as I dusted the mantel, I found one of her earrings tucked behind a photo frame, a small, gold stud shaped like a teardrop. I held it up to the light, watching it catch the sunset. Somehow, that little piece of her felt heavier than it should have. The phone rang then. Daniel's voice, quiet. Mom, can I come over for dinner? It was the first time he'd asked in weeks. When he arrived, he looked thinner, older somehow. He tried to smile, but it wavered. Over dinner, we talked about small things. The weather, his work, the new project he'd started. But under it all, the silence between us spoke of all the things neither of us could yet say. After we ate, I finally asked, Have you heard from her? He shook his head. No, but I keep thinking about what I missed. The signs, the truth. His voice broke slightly. I don't know if I'm angry or ashamed. I reached across the table and took his hand. You loved her. That's not something to be ashamed of. The person who betrays love carries the burden, not the one who gave it honestly. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes glistening. You really believe that? I have to, I said softly. Otherwise, none of this pain would mean anything. He nodded slowly, and in that moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who used to run to me when his heart was broken over scraped knees and playground fights. Except now, the wounds were deeper, invisible, adult. Later that night, after he left, I walked to the window and looked out into the dark. The garden lights flickered faintly in the rain. And I thought about how easily beauty can disguise fragility, how often the things that shine brightest are the ones closest to breaking. On the table behind me, the gold earring still caught the lamp's glow. I picked it up and placed it gently in a small box, closing the lid like closing a chapter. Maybe Olivia would never truly regret what she'd done. Maybe her apology and that one brief note was all she was capable of. But standing there, listening to the steady rhythm of rain against glass, I realized something profound. Sometimes regret isn't about wishing things had gone differently. It's about finally seeing them for what they were. And as the rain softened into a hush, I whispered into the empty room, "It's over now." But even as I said it, I knew. Some echoes take a long time to fade. It was a crisp autumn morning when Daniel showed up at my door again. Eyes red, coat unbuttoned, hands trembling slightly as he clutched a brown envelope. Something in his posture told me that this wasn't just a visit. This was reckoning. He walked in without a word, set the envelope on the kitchen table, and just stood there. "She called me," he said finally. "Olivia!" My breath caught. I hadn't heard her name spoken in weeks. What did she want? He exhaled shakily. "Money. She said she'd sign whatever legal papers I needed to close things off. The divorce, the house. But only if I paid her to disappear quietly." For a moment, silence filled the kitchen. The clock ticked softly in the background, marking the seconds between heartbreaks. I studied his face. There was no anger this time, just exhaustion. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her I'd think about it," he said, running a hand through his hair. "But I can't let her get away with this, Mom. Not after everything." That was when I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not vindication, but clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. "I recorded her," I said quietly. He looked up sharply. "What?" "That day she came here," I continued. "After you found out about the money, she came to plead her case. Remember?" I knew something was off, so I kept my phone recording. "I still have it." Daniel blinked, disbelief and relief fighting for space on his face. You recorded her?" I nodded. "She admitted it all, Daniel. The fake love, the prenup she never read, how she thought she'd outsmart everyone. I never played it for you because I wanted you to heal first." He sat down heavily, staring at the table. "Mom, do you still have it?" Without another word, I walked to the drawer by the sink and pulled out my old phone. It was scratched and slow, but when I pressed play, Olivia's voice filled the room like a ghost made of sound. "He'll never see it coming," she said on the recording, laughing softly. "The house will be mine, and once the transfer clears..." I stopped the playback. The silence afterward was deafening. Daniel's face had gone pale. He stood abruptly, gripping the edge of the counter. "I can't believe I let her..." "Stop," I said firmly. "You can't keep punishing yourself for trusting someone you loved." He swallowed hard, nodding. "I want to send this to my lawyer," he said finally. "She needs to face the consequences." "Then do it," I said, meeting his eyes. "End this for good." He took the phone, his hand steady now. "I thought losing her was the worst thing that could happen," he murmured. "But maybe the worst thing was believing her in the first place." I reached out and touched his arm gently. "No, Daniel. The worst thing would have been if you never learned the truth." That night, I sat by the fire while Daniel emailed the recording to his attorney. The flames flickered against the dark windows, casting our reflections in ghostly gold. It felt like watching two survivors finally standing after the storm. When he was done, he turned to me and smiled. Tired, grateful, free. "Thank you, Mom," he said softly. "For what?" I asked. "For never giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." I smiled back, my chest tightening with emotion. "That's what mothers do," I whispered. "We wait for our children to come home, no matter how long it takes." And as the fire crackled, the shadows of betrayal seemed to fade, leaving only warmth, fragile but real, in their place. The morning after everything ended, the house finally felt alive again. Light spilled through the curtains, golden and gentle, touching every surface like forgiveness. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Familiar, comforting, safe. It was the first time in months I'd woken up without that ache pressing on my chest. Daniel was in the kitchen making breakfast, the kind of small, ordinary gesture that once seemed impossible between us. He looked peaceful now, his shoulders no longer weighed down by guilt. When he turned to me and smiled, it was the first true smile I'd seen from him in a long, long time. "Mom," he said softly, setting 2 plates on the table. "It's over, officially. The lawyers handled everything this morning." I nodded, though part of me still couldn't believe it. The chapter that had torn our family apart was finally closed. "I'm proud of you," I told him. He smiled faintly. I should be the one saying that. We ate quietly for a while, the sound of forks against plates mingling with birdsong outside. The same house that once felt haunted now hummed with quiet life again. I thought about all we'd survived, lies, betrayal, heartbreak, and how somehow through all that pain, love had found a way to hold us together. After breakfast, Daniel walked out onto the porch with his coffee. I followed, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders. The sun was rising over the hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. It was one of those perfect fleeting moments, the kind you want to memorize forever. "I still think about her," he admitted quietly. "Not with hate, just wondering where it all went wrong." "That's part of healing," I said. "You don't erase love by hating someone. You let it fade until it stops hurting." He looked at me, his eyes filled with something softer now, understanding. "How did you do it, Mom? After Dad passed? After everything?" I smiled gently. By remembering that pain doesn't mean the end of love, it just changes its shape. We stood in silence, watching the sunlight climb higher. For once, the quiet between us wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Later, when he left for work, I stayed on the porch. I looked at the garden, the same one I used to tend while worrying if my son would ever come home again. The wind moved through the flowers, soft and patient, whispering something only I could hear. I went inside and sat on the sofa, the same one where I'd once cried, where I'd once found an earring that changed everything. Now that same spot felt different. It wasn't haunted by loss anymore. It held the strength of everything we'd overcome. On the side table, I kept a framed photo of Daniel as a child, his gap-toothed grin, his father's eyes. Beside it, I placed a new picture, Daniel smiling again, standing in the yard just last week. It was my quiet reminder that life moves forward, always. As the day faded into evening, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. I wanted to capture this feeling, this moment of stillness after chaos. My final line read, "Sometimes love means letting the truth break what's already broken, so it can heal right." I closed the notebook, set it aside, and turned off the lamp. The room fell into a gentle glow, warm, calm, alive. Outside, the night settled softly over the house, and as I stood by the window, watching the stars blink awake, I whispered to the quiet world beyond the glass, "We're okay now." And for the first time, I truly believed it. The story of our family, of deception, heartbreak, and redemption, was never just about the house, or the lies, or even the marriage that broke it all. It was about love in its most fragile human form, imperfect, enduring, and painfully real. A mother's instinct is never wrong. I knew, deep down, even when I didn't have proof. And though it cost me peace, it also gave me strength, the kind that builds from breaking and still choosing to stand. Lies always crumble. They shimmer for a while, like glass in sunlight, but truth always finds a way to shine through the cracks. What's built on deceit will collapse, but love, real love, endures the fall. Pain transforms when you face it with courage. The hardest thing I ever did was stop trying to fix others and start healing myself. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about releasing the grip the past had on me. You can't save someone from love's illusions, but you can stand beside them when the illusion shatters. That's What motherhood is, standing firm when everything else falls apart. It's holding the truth gently enough not to break your child, but firmly enough that they can't run from it. It's the quiet kind of love, patient, fierce, and endlessly forgiving. And as I sit in this house, once haunted by lies, now filled with peace, I know one thing for certain: love doesn't survive because it's easy. It survives because in the end, truth sets it free.